Okay, thank you, class. Thank you for joining me today. And today we'll be talking about two different topics regarding urban mobility and how much we are depending upon the automobiles. Let's dive into the concept of urban mobility. So, why do we need to study urban mobility? Uh, that mobility is one of the basic principles in urban planning, in which we increase the convenience of people to travel around the city. So urban mobility has very close linkages with urban planning and transportation planning. And as we know that rapid urban development has been happening, and that has increased number of passengers and freight movement within the urban areas. So a lot of people are traveling from one point to another. So urban mobility is a concept which tries to determine how people are moving and how conveniently they are moving, how fast they are moving, how different facilities are accessible to them, and how they can reach them. So there are different studies which tries to commute that how much is the most optimum time for travel. So, but generally, some studies say that 1 hour has remained optimum for the last 100 years. That is the best time. That's the bearable time for travel using any mode. So, for the walking mode, it might be different, 30 to 40 minutes, depending on the person's health. But if we are traveling through any mode, then 1 hour is has remained. It's debatable, but 1 hour has remained per day is an optimum travel time. Uh, but the main advancement in urban mobilities was due to the faster availability of faster transport modes, and they provided that within 1 hour, same period, we can travel from one place to another. And that then, of course, gave us planners potential to develop or, I would say, increase the size of the cities. So if 1 hour, if fast modes are available and we can travel in 1 hour in a city, so a person can move around the city for job purposes or any purpose for that matter. So city size can grow up if the transportation system supports up to 1 hour drive. Uh, and now this to increase the number of mobilities, technologies and infrastructure have been tried to be upgraded over time. And with this upgradation, the distances has increased within the same time period. So to experiment with the mobilities, different transportation, different cities of the world, different countries of the world, they have developed different type of urban transportation systems. So depending upon uh, different, I would say, finance within financial capabilities or technical expertise, people have these countries have launched different transportation systems. Now, of course, this is a very generic that there are three types basically of transportable mobility. It can be individual, collective, or freight transportation. So, what is a collective? That is, we call it public transit system, uh, which the main purpose is to move a large number of people within the city, and it should be publicly accessible to all. It should be everyone should it should be available for all of us, right? So publicly it is available, and the systems are commonly owned and operated by different agencies, can be private or can be public as well. It should be accessible, so that is why they're called public transit. Simple as that. Uh, and the main purpose of urban transport system is that it will save a lot of money per head, per capita. It will give you a large efficiency. The fares would be bearable for the you can say layman or for the general public. And because of the principles of economies of scale, in which if a large number of scale or quantity is moving, then per capita price of that product will decrease. That using that principle, public transport has emerged as a very, I would say, financially feasible for the public. It is feasible for the public to use this kind of transport because it is very cheap, and that includes tramways, buses, trains, subways, and ferry boats. So these are some different type of public transit systems. Uh, used by the world. One of the most important part due to this using of automobile is the individual transportation. So people are using their own choices, they are utilizing their own freedom to move. So uh, it can include any mode, but predominantly it is walking, by the way, because walking, this includes automobile, walking, cycle, and majority of people is the main mode is the walk. Now the walking is most of the times not included in your transportation models. These because uh, it does not have significant impact upon the traffic movement of your city. So walking is usually uh, discarded in these models. But large number of people used to walk. Like for example, if you're in your home and you need to buy something near your house, you usually go on foot, right? Because all these shopping centers or commercial areas, small shops, basically retail shops, they're easily accessible if you go by foot. So that is the majority of people are walking from one place to another. But it varies a lot. Like if in Tokyo, all of the movements were 88% of movements were inside Tokyo, while the figure in Los Angeles only 3%. People move on foot. It all depends upon the city is how the infrastructure supports your city. Lastly, is the freight transportation. Uh, I mean, simple. It is movement between production and consumption. A lot of logistics are moved from one place to another. So, depending upon increase of this e-commerce, when it has been reported that due to this pandemic, overwhelming shopping is already shifted to e-commerce. Even in Pakistan, majority of e-commerce has taken over your normal traditional shopping, I would say. And now this freight transportation or city logistics, as we call it at city level, uh, it has now transformed or evolved very much. And it is predicted in the future that all of your shopping, uh, uh, almost everything you shop for your household or product will be um, through e-commerce. So transportation systems now need to uh, acknowledge that this because of e-commerce, a lot of now product will be on the road as well. So that will add to the traffic. A lot of trucks will be moving within the city. Lot of big, I would say, vehicles that will be transporting goods in the city center. That would be happening in the future. So we need to prepare that for as well. Okay. So what about the other mobility solutions which are available? So individual based or group based, like public transit, carpooling is also considered as uh, a group based, or but it is not under public transit because not everyone can share it. So carpooling is a group based mobility. We can also group it as individual based and group based mobility. And now this because of this Uber and Careem and this kind of e-hailing services are available for to us. That is usually uh, described under the individual-based model. So the main concept in our uh, urban mobility analysis is that we need to balance between two concepts. That is accessibility and ease of reaching a potential destination. Something which is accessible to everyone, physically accessible to everyone. We can reach it easily. Okay, so the more the accessibility, more movement between two certain points. Okay, that is accessibility. And uh, depending upon the distances or the friction, we call it, or the impedance, the word we use in the transportation, friction of or impedance, in which if the distance between the two activity sites increases, then the accessibility will decrease. So that is unless until it is compensated by mobility. So what is mobility? Mobility is, I would say, like how fast we are moving from one place to another. Okay. So in big roads, let's say talk about large highways, the mobility is great. Movement is very fast, right? But accessibility is very low. I would say like this. Let's talk about example of motorway in Pakistan. So your accessibility to cities is limited, but your speed is very high. But if we move to let's say GT road, your speeds are low, but your accessibility to nearby areas is increased relatively. So similarly, if we move on to small level roads, neighborhood level roads, different types of, by the way, road hierarchies are out there. So if you move to local level, small level roads, your accessibility is improved, but your mobility becomes very slow. So there is an inverse relationship between mobility and accessibility. The more the mobility, more is the lesser will be the accessibility. If the accessibility is greater, then mobility will be low. But at our main issue, our main, I would say, uh, game or our main uh, objective is to have a balance between mobility and accessibility. Because in city centers, we need accessibility as well, not only mobility, but we need mobility as well. So we need to have a balance between them. For national highways, mobilities are for greater, I would say, importance. So mobility is emphasized in national highways. But as we move to provincial, then maybe a local or city level, then we need more accessibility. So we need a balance between them. Now, different types of industrial eras have again evolved our way of how we travel, how we are mobile. So uh, we have seen that individual and motorized travel have increased after industrial era, and our public transit has increased. So that is, by the way, example of I think USA. So non-motorized also people are less traveling less and less. Then is your distance. I was talking about uh, that your different modes, different I would say uh, because of the distance, your choosing or mode choice have changed. So as the number of trips are increasing, if there is one trip, for example, let's say a small trips, then you will say, okay, let's go on bike, bicycle, or walking, or even bike. But as if certain after certain number of trips increases, your distance if increases between the trips, you will opt for motorized type of transportation. We've talked about these technologies and models and finances as well beforehand, how which is influencing your land uses. But in terms of mobility, your technology, finances, and business models are highly interlinked. And city characteristics are always, of course, there. The land use and everything is there as well. But things which actually shape the mobility would be the policy and regulations, which we are kind of promoting, and that will ultimately help people in choosing that are we opting for a public infrastructure or are we opting for privately owned vehicles. Land use and land design, consumer preferences. Now, this will ultimately define how or which type of mobility options we are giving to the people. So nowadays we are also adding that internet as a flow of information from place to another. We have also added uh, this information transportation, I would say transport has been added. So that is also sometimes considered that this is the new mobility services in transportation system. But generally, because if we are going to be developing models in the future in which we'll be talking about different types of urban mobilities which are commonly used in the models. So what are those movements or what are the names of those urban mobilities? Well, they are basically based on purposes, and they're linked very much to the urban activities and the land use. We've talked about this urban structures and urban land use. And these land uses, like we've talked in urban planning, compatible or incompatible land uses. So certain land uses will attract or generate different type of trips. For example, if you're living in a house or a residential area, your area would generate trips. Like people will be leaving home for the job purposes. And somewhere, let's say commercial centers, employment areas, industries, they are attracting those kind of movements. I will go into the detail of this generation and attraction in the coming lectures as well. And now this is the relationship of this attraction and generation attraction is very complex. It's very difficult. It involves many factors, multifold factors. How much trips will be generated each day? What time will it be generated? What are the impacts of socioeconomic characteristics on the trip generations? Right? What is urban form patterns, spatial accumulation or densities, level of development and technology? So different factors are there. We'll talk about them later. Some are daily, will be done like Monday, 5 days a week. Let's say work trips from before 9 o'clock, 8 to 9. There'll be a majority of work trips. 7 to 8 maybe educational trips. A lot of people will move for educational purposes. After 8 to 9, then in the evening, these trips are obligatory. These will be done automatic. These are scheduled activities that will happen every day. So those are called home to work, for example, home to work movements. Voluntary, it's up to you if you want to go weekends, you want to go shopping, you want to go have a leisure activities. But main generation, let's call it a taxonomy in which classify these urban mobilities. The first is the pendulum activities. These are obligated and they are cyclic, like they will go to and fro. Residence to work, work for, and then from work back to the home. So these are pendulum movements. Then are professional movements. You go for meetings. You have some professional obligations to have some movement. Maybe you're going for a visit. The professional movements are there. So these will depend upon the type of employment patterns in the society. And if we know about the percentages of different employment, then we can estimate professional movements. Pendulum movements we can estimate by if we have enough data of people who are doing jobs, how many people in a particular household are doing job, and then we can, having a collective data, we can have kind of estimates. Personal movements like commercial activities for shopping and recreation activities, also called commercial activities. Now these are different type of activities. These are general classification, I would say, and some different words might be used by different papers or research articles. So be open to that. Yes, so touristic movements are there in which people go for tourism. So maybe in those particular seasonal trips are there. And then last is the distribution trips in which this freight movement or logistical movements are being done in the cities. So this is a pattern which we need, but depending on different types, there are different patterns to the each type of movement and the dominant time available. So different times are available. So as like let's say talking about freight movement, usually it is government, cities, administrations put a nighttime limit that you need to uh, deliver your products at the night time. So different destinations are there depending upon type of your I would say urban structure or urban form. These will vary. Okay, then moving on. So the first point, thing to understand is trip generation. Trip generation is a trip is a uh, how would you define a trip? Trip is basically uh, people leave their house for a particular purpose to achieve certain thing using certain mode. That is trip generation. People go for something and come back. That is trip. Okay. So on average, an urban resident takes 3 to 4 trips per day. Just imagine how many trips you are taking. Of course, now due to pandemic, our restriction, our movements have been restricted. But on a normal days, just imagine how many trips you are doing per day. It includes your walking by foot trips, maybe by different type of modes. So if you change the mode, your trip will change. So new trip will be generated. So main purpose is that it is used to satisfy a purpose. If you're going for employment, like you're goods or assessing some goods and services, then you are generating a trip. And each time, if the purpose satisfied, then it should be generated. And that is, it varies temporally at times of day, what time different trips will be generated. And if we have enough data, then we can try to model that how many trips will be on the road on a particular day of a time, and will be the traffic might be, let's say, congested. So we can generate this urban mobility model. Okay, other ways to describe the passenger trips is the work trips, your business trips, your personal trips, and your shopping trips, also called commercial trips. So these are the common purposes or commonly used in your different models. Then is your recreational trips, your educational trips, and your social trips. So these are some very commonly used trips, which we'll be talking about in the future slides as well, the future models as well. So what are the different proportions of that these trips? So generally work trips are which have a significant portion of your traveling, followed by some different trips. Then is your time period. So depending upon the time, your trips will vary. So how at home you will leave alone, come alone. So just have a map. Just think about how you are moving your typical or average urban day trips or night trips if you're leaving home at night. So your trips are there. So you can now, this is a diagram, or you can say concept of a simple household person who is moving from one point. So what about different number of households? The more number of households, more number of your model will become more complex. So once we have enough data, then we can estimate very good. We can generate very good models out of them. But now there's mobility is also emerged as an equity issue that uh, location, status symbols, status, income, and quality of public transport has made it an equity issue. Some people have availability of these certain things, some people do not have. Like for example, mass transit is often used by the students, elderly, poor, because they are economically they are strained. So mass transit focused on that as well. And variations in this mobility also varies according to age, income, gender, and disability. Right. So if we want an inclusive mobility or inclusive urban development, then mobility should cater the needs for all type of people. So that is one of the reasons that mass transit is kind of failing in Pakistan as well, because it's not geared towards everyone. It's not accessible to everyone, first of all, right? So if it's not accessible, then people will automatically opt for automobiles or other modes of transportation. Uh, Another issue, the gender gap in mobility. If your public transit is limited in your cities, it will ultimately women will travel less. They will have less opportunity to move from one place to another because women prefer, because of public and safety, they prefer sometimes public transit system. So that automatically that influences your mobility patterns in your city. And mobility of people, constrained individual, which do not have a car, will only have accessibility of number of jobs. So economically, that person will suffer because he or she does not have a car. Then is your spatial equality, spatial inequality. So of course, if you're living in a city center, you might have more mobility options. You might have more uh, job opportunities as well. So depending upon where you are located in a city, that will define your mobility. If you're sit outside the city, you would need to travel a long time, spend a lot of money, and so you will have limited access to automobiles. And so let's say you are facing isolation and you are missing out the opportunities. So spatial inequality is also there. Gender mobility inequality, spatial inequality, these kind of things are to be kept in mind. We're talking about gender-based mobility. Look at this, how this mobility varies among gender. So women are prone to less travel as compared to males. So this is data from Pakistan, and we are comparing. Let's talk about. Okay, we can even compare urban and rural. So let's talk about depending on male and female. So uh, yes, so 86% almost most of the females are walking. Generating trips, their automobile are same. Females are using more taxis and e-hailing services. At that time of survey, there was no train, and it was, I think, it was it. I think it was conducted in Islamabad and Rawalpindi region. Uh, so buses, males are traveling more. Bicycle, females are using very less. And so another way of representation, I think, yeah, is uh, is by the same study and daily trips and minutes traveled by male and female. So female are traveling very less number as compared to males. So they are in terms of work trips. And for learning, females are traveling more to learn something, maybe education. So these are different types of trips characterized by the travel purposes. So you see differences between them. Another way is mean daily trip. How many trips do males and female takes? So look at Pakistan, around 55% females do not take any kind of trip. They do not leave their house, right? And 1 to 2 trips still females are leading in that. But after that, after 2 trips, it decreases significantly. Males are more mobile, or you can say, than females. And comparing urban and female rural, like depending on that. So if you're talking about female urban and female rural, that is the lowest one. You will see that, uh, contrary to the belief, the rural female are more mobile as compared to your urban females. But in rural, you will see that, I mean, there is a lot of overlaps and averages would remain same. But on average, uh, and depending on age as well, your female in rural areas are more mobile. So, any questions till now, class? So, any questions? I've talked about different things. Yes, this one, please.
सर एक लास्ट लाइफ में आपने टूरिज्म की बात की थी, उसमें ये था कि हाईली लोकलाइज्ड की बात हो रही थी, तो
Mm-hmm.
क्या यहाँ पे फॉरेनर्स की बात नहीं होनी चाहिए साथ में, या उनको हम कंसिडर नहीं करना चाहिए?
Okay. You're right, this one. When we're talking about, I think, touristic. Yeah. Yeah. So this was just an issue. अच्छा, आप ये बात करना चाह रहे हैं, okay. So the point is that touristic movements के अंदर भी there are a lot of classification, further classifications. If you're talking about, like example, touristic are, let's talk about Murray, okay. So that is a tourist destination. So that is highly localized. People will only visit these kind of areas, right? आपका पूरा शहर, let's say लाहौर है, पूरा शहर टूरिस्ट के लिए नहीं है. कुछ जगह हैं, बादशाही मस्जिद, लेट्स से, ठीक है, वो एक हाईली लोकलाइज्ड और बड़ा एक स्मॉल पोर्शन है, स्मॉल पार्ट ऑफ द सिटी है, जहाँ हाईली लोकलाइज्ड फंक्शंस है. तो टूरिस्टिक की खास प्लेसेस पूरे शहर में नहीं फिरते, वो खास खास जगहों पे फिरते हैं. सो दैट इज कॉल्ड हाईली लोकलाइज्ड. बट यू आर राइट, इफ यू टॉकिंग अबाउट फॉरेन टूरिज्म, अनफॉर्चुनेटली पाकिस्तान के पास तो इतना डाटा ही नहीं है. लेकिन यू आर राइट that for seasonal trips, if we have enough data that in this season different types of people are coming, then we can plan accordingly. For example, in Europe, let's say, a lot of people travel from northern Europe. They travel to south sides, to Italy, Spain, for the warm weather. They travel a lot, so they are modeling them that how many people are usually traveling and what sort of needs they have, and depending upon that, they make They plan their transportation systems, and they plan it accordingly as well. But you're right. This one. Yes. Any other question, class? Uh, Today I was very fast, but if you have missed anything, if you do not and you did not understand, please feel free to ask question. No question? Okay, so I'll stop the recording.